Sehr geehrter Herr
Federal President, Federal Minister, Excellencies, Members of Parliament, colleagues, distinguished guests, a warm welcome to all of you. We are delighted that you are attending with us the 75th anniversary of the re-establishment of the Federal Foreign Office. Allow me to make some organizational remarks. Our festive event this morning consists of two parts. After the opening by Foreign Minister Wadefuhl, we will listen to the keynote speech of the Federal President. Afterwards, we would like to invite you to a short coffee break that will also be attended by the Federal President. Afterwards, we will have an exciting session with the Federal Minister and a dynamic session dedicated to the future, which is organized by the trainees of the Foreign Service. To wrap up, we will have a musical interlude by the artist Lea. And now I'm delighted to give the floor to the Federal Minister. Thank you. Federal President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, colleagues, Excellencies, distinguished guests. I would like to speak about three images today. The first one is not an image in a narrow sense, but rather in a metaphorical sense, an image of remembrance. On the second floor, Mr. President, you know this building very well, there is a big memorial wall. 13 names are written on the upper part of the plaque on the memorial wall. The names of members of the Foreign Service who felt bound by their own conscience during the Nazi dictatorship. Some of them were involved in the assassination attempt of the 20th of July. They stood firm and acted due to their conviction and had to pay for that with their lives. But there are even more names on that wall. The names of those who lost their lives in active service since 1945. They died as victims of wars, for example, in Lebanon, or in terrorist attacks, like in the RAF's attack on the German embassy in Stockholm, or Gerold von Braunmühl, who was assassinated by the Red Army faction 40 years ago. The people behind these names died while serving German Foreign Service, the German Foreign Service that was dedicated itself to peace. And ladies and gentlemen, the fact that there was such a German foreign policy after the cruelties of the Third Reich is something we owe to the Western allies, most importantly, because after 1945 there was no longer a German foreign policy. It was not allowed to have one until step by step, the United States of America, the United Kingdom, and France handed back political self-determination to a community that reconstituted itself in May 1949 as the Federal Republic of Germany, as a free and democratic nation. In order to be able to engage in foreign policy again, in the morning of the 15th of March 1951, that is 75 years ago, a foreign ministry was re-established, and as during Bismarck's time, it was called Foreign Office. Konrad Adenauer became its first federal minister. Ladies and gentlemen, this was something that could not be taken for granted because the Federal Foreign Office was just as broken as the German post-war society. The long shadows of the Nazi dictatorship were still visible in terminology, staff, and structures. The reason for Western allies to place their trust in us was mainly thanks to the people who refused to be corrupted by the Nazi regime and gave us a clear compass of values. And that brings me to my second image, a photograph showing Konrad Adenauer on the 21st of September 1949, 6 days after he was elected federal chancellor. He stands on a carpet and reads out a statement. This photograph was taken at the seat of the Allied High Commission at Petersberg in Bonn. This day, the occupation statute entered into force. The regulation specifying the prerogatives of Western allies, that is the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, would still have vis-à-vis the new Federal Republic. Protocol stipulated that the High Commissioners were to stand on a carpet, whereas the delegation of the Federal Republic should stand on the bare floor next to them. Adenauer, however, broke with protocol and stepped up and stood on the carpet with the Allies and gave his speech from there. No one protested. This image became a symbolic gesture of newly gained self-confidence, a first step towards political maturity. This photograph, you can see it here, is the first in this small exhibition called Steps Towards Freedom that you can visit here today. It shows unforgettable moments of Germany's history, such as German-French reconciliation and German reunification. My thanks go out to all the colleagues who made this exhibition possible. Ladies and gentlemen, why am I telling you all of this? Not because dealing with our own past was an end in itself, but because it is in our current interest to have our history in mind. Because this throwback offers us an opportunity to learn for the present and the future. I'm convinced that diplomacy is more necessary than ever, because we are faced with new epochal challenges. And let me just mention 3 examples. Firstly, the international order, as we've known it over the past 75 years, has come under pressure, to say the least. Some try to destroy it. Secondly, our transatlantic relationship is undergoing profound change. I would like to make the case for us to never forget that it was also mainly the United States that freed us from the Nazi regime, that shaped the young Federal Republic and made our reunification possible. And thirdly, for the first time in generations, Europe has to simultaneously deal with 2 wars right at our borders and in our vicinity. A Russian war of aggression against its neighbor Ukraine, in the midst of our own continent, and a war in the Middle East and the Gulf region. Our own security is possibly in more acute danger than it ever was over the past 75 years, and I'm saying this as someone who served as a soldier in the Cold War and remembers the tensions back then very well. This is why we in Europe need to stand united and make the security of Europe our main priority. Vis-à-vis these challenges and threats, it is the task of German diplomacy to make a future in security, peace and prosperity possible and fight for it again and again. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, we need to think in new ways today. And at the Foreign Office, we are well trained in finding new ways of thinking. This is also reflected in the exhibition, The Foreign Office over the course of time in the Blue Hall. Maybe you would like to have a look at this organizational history of the Foreign Office during the coffee break. Today, new challenges ask us to find new solutions and approaches to solutions. We need a modern, future-proof, strong foreign service with the necessary structures. This is why since November we've been engaged in restructuring our Foreign Office. Starting in summer, the structure of our headquarters will even better reflect the new situation the world finds itself in. And part of this is also that we reassess the way of how we work, because AI and new means of communication also change our own job description. And this, by the way, is one reason why I, as a minister aged 60 plus, am also broadly present on social media, because I'm convinced that we need to explain foreign policy even better today, both at home and abroad, in a way that people in our country trust us and trust our decisions. We have regained the trust of our European neighbors after the Second World War, and this too is a diplomatic milestone. For this to remain the case, I personally am very committed in budget negotiations also to make sure that the Foreign Office receives the necessary financial and human resources. And I'm looking to the members of parliament who are here today. Thank you very much for being with us today, because if we don't use these resources now, it will be even more costly in the future to defend our future or regain it. But, ladies and gentlemen, without you, colleagues across the globe, this would not be possible. The last weeks have shown it once again. The Foreign Service is not a service like many others. We've seen over the past weeks that we can all rely on you, and this is especially important in times of such crises, and I would like to express my sincere thanks to all of you. The teams at the foreign missions in Tehran, Baghdad, and Erbil are now in safety, and we're very glad to know that they're in safety. But we are also thinking of the colleagues who are still working at the missions in the regions under very difficult conditions day after day. I'm grateful for these colleagues and our team to have helped thousands of German nationals come back home to Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, when we look to the future and ask ourselves how German foreign policy will evolve, it is also helpful to have a look at the act on the German Foreign Service. I'm saying this as a lawyer. The so-called GAD, the Act on the Foreign Service, stipulates, and it won't come as a surprise to you, the Foreign Service fosters the relations of the Federal Republic of Germany and foreign states. Fostering international relations is and always will be the core of our diplomacy. This means that we need to travel, get a sense of the situation on the ground, meet people in person, read between the lines, listen. In other words, diplomacy is and remains people's business. And I think that this strong core is future-proof, no matter which technologies will emerge. Human interaction cannot be replaced by any machine. And that brings me to the third image I would like to address today. That is the one that we will shortly see on stage, the future of the Foreign Service. Our trainees who will present their ideas about the future of the Foreign Service in the second part of the event, and I'm excited to hear from them. But before we come to the diplomatic offspring, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker today, Federal President. We welcome a German diplomat in a state of unrest. As Federal President and Foreign Minister who had two tenures, you are a true veteran in diplomacy, and I know that from the countless discussions we had, and you were so kind as to invite me many times to such discussions. But you were wrong in one thing. When you were elected Federal President in 2017, you bade farewell to the staff of this great ministry once again, and you said, "This is a goodbye, and this time I really won't come back." But you're here, Mr. President, you are back. Welcome, Mr. President. The floor is yours.
Verehrter Herr Bundesminister,
Foreign Minister, distinguished ministers of state and state secretaries, excellencies, Members of the Federal Foreign Office, esteemed guests, dear ladies and gentlemen, what a familiar sight indeed, the stately room. The world is covered, but the name Weltsaal, World Hall, actually is talking about an ambition, about the ministry's great and sometimes too great job of keeping an eye on the entire world. That is your job. I want to thank you very much, Jo Waardevol, for inviting me today. This is a reflection of our friendly cooperation, and most importantly, it also gives me the opportunity to congratulate this venerable ministry on its anniversary and to express my gratitude and respect to its staff. Thank you so much, and congratulations on turning 75, ladies and gentlemen. The history of the Federal Foreign Office is their story, the story of those who represent our country throughout the world and who, over the course of 75 years, through their work, as much as through their personality, humanity, and integrity, have nurtured trust in our country. This new trust, you said it, Mr. Waardevol, after the total political and moral ruin caused by Nazi Germany, was and remains the foundation of the Federal Republic's success story. During my time here as minister or at the Federal Chancellery in the German Bundestag, or for nearly 10 years as federal president, I have personally had the opportunity to get to know and value entire generations of diplomats and staff at all levels of the service. More than a few of you are among my closest colleagues and friends. Members of the Federal Foreign Office, I know that for all of you, the Foreign Service is more than just a job. Joining the Foreign Service is a major life decision, a way of life that for you and your families has often been great and exciting, as well as not easy, but in any case, one that is and remains enormously important for our country. The history of the Federal Foreign Office has been written by you, by people, and it will continue to be written by people. We heard that just now. Artificial intelligence may be useful, for example, when it comes to preparing so many speaking notes. Some would say too many. And we at the Office of the Federal President know that we contribute to this too. I too admit that I'm at a fault here. But especially now, at this breathtaking and highly volatile time, surrounded by constant political and technological disruption, we need you, smart diplomats, with your power of judgment, your ability to communicate, and your integrity. While today many may view it as weak and unimportant, it is in times like these, marked by crises and conflicts, that we need more, not less diplomacy. I'm convinced of that. And yes, how nice it is to see that the next generation of diplomats has been given a leading role at this anniversary celebration. My dear trainee diplomats, I have the greatest respect for your decision to enter this profession. I am pleased that, particularly in our present-day world, at a time that heaven knows is not easy, you have said yes to serving our country and yes to the Foreign Service. For me, if you will allow a short historical digression, the decision to lead, how should I put it, a very political life occurred a little over 35 years ago. Up to 1989, I could have easily imagined remaining in academia. In the autumn of 1989, I was working on the final chapter of my dissertation when the Berlin Wall fell. And then the future seemed filled with possibilities, and people were full of confidence. Germany's historical good fortune after the war, a new beginning, the economic miracle, reconciliation, European integration, And finally, reunification seemed back then in the early 1990s to reflect a long upward linear trajectory, one that would continue in the world and in the future. More peace, more freedom, and more democracy. We, I myself, and possibly some of your older colleagues here in this room, wanted to be part of this development, free from naivety, and with plenty of energy. We wanted to help build a world that would become a little bit better day by day, and in the process to impart to the world some of the good fortune that Germany had experienced. The contrast to the present day could hardly be greater. Confidence has become quite rare, especially here in the heart of Europe. The world around us, and Mr. Wadefull said it, seems to be growing a little more dangerous, brutal, and irrational every day. And just as the international order that we work to uphold disintegrates a little more day by day, we, Germany, seem to be becoming ever more sidelined on the global stage. To put it bluntly, the more we're shocked at where global politics is headed, the less we're able to do about it. Do we still need a foreign service? Will be the lead-in question, as I heard, for the discussion during the second part of today's event. I find a daring and honest question to ask at an anniversary celebration, and one that, simply by being asked, a question that raises concern. Ivan Krastev recently remarked that Germany's present-day troubles are paradoxically not caused by the failure, but rather by the success of its post-war policies. Precisely because the lessons we have drawn from the Second World War have been forever ingrained, and especially because war in Europe appeared to have become unthinkable, we Germans have a hard time dealing with the return of brute power politics when international law is violated and when the historical memory of many does not even reach back as far as Iraq, Libya, or Afghanistan. In short, German foreign policy faces a fundamental realignment. We need to redraw our mental map of the world. And these historically challenging times, you, esteemed staff assembled here in this room, and your many colleagues in our missions abroad, you are serving our country in these challenging times. While the circumstances are completely different compared to 1951 or the Cold War era, however, the strategic challenge may be no less great today than for those who 75 years ago set out to chart a new course towards a new peaceful foreign policy that would build trust in the Federal Republic. Why am I talking about such a fundamental shift? Because I believe that 4 cornerstones define the decades of what was at first West German foreign policy following the re-establishment of the Federal Foreign Office. First, the division of Germany and overcoming that division. Second, integration with the West. Third, European integration. And fourth, the relationship and dialogue with the eastern part of our continent. A level-headed assessment of the situation in 2026 reveals that 3 of these 4 cornerstones have, at least for the foreseeable future, been swept aside, making the one remaining invariable cornerstone, European unity, all the more important. Let me briefly sketch out the strategic picture. The German question, which was unresolved for many years and occupied us for decades in both parts of Germany, has been conclusively answered and written into international law since 1990. Moreover, I should mention that our ranks were bolstered with the addition of many great colleagues from the eastern part of Germany. That said, that's part of the truth. Internal unification of our country remains a great task for our society. But let me stress this here in this eminent hall. Luckily, it is no longer a foreign policy task. The cornerstones of West and East, the relationship with Washington and with Moscow, preoccupied all successive German governments of the past decades. However, this period is particularly associated with two names, two chancellors and foreign ministers. Konrad Adenauer, who firmly positioned the young Federal Republic within the Western Alliance, and Willy Brandt, who initiated a new Ostpolitik during his time in office. Both of these cornerstones are now being overturned in a way that was hitherto unthinkable. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has fundamentally broken with the principles of the European security order. Efforts, and I recall that well, to build a common European home with Russia after the fall of the Iron Curtain has occupied this ministry and generations of politicians, including myself, for decades. Precisely because we Germans have seen for ourselves how a policy of small steps, a policy of dialogue combined with strength, of deterrence and détente can be successful, ranging from the early days of the CSCE more than 50 years ago to the fortunate outcomes of reunification and the EU's eastward enlargement, is why we kept up these efforts for a long time. We now know it was for too long. With Russia's tanks at the gates of Kyiv, all of these efforts were reduced to rubble and a horrible war was unleashed on Ukraine. I believe even after the war, we will not be able to focus on peace with Russia, but rather on how we perceive the likelihood and nature of conflict. In other words, Europe must now organize its security against Russia, not with Russia. The rift in the transatlantic relationship since the start of President Trump's second term, for us, is no less deep. I therefore refer to our day and age being marked by a double epochal shift, not for the first time, not because what is happening in Moscow and Washington is the same or even comparable, but because both shifts are forcing a fundamental strategic shift in our foreign policy. Just as I believe our relationship with Russia can never return to what it was before the 24th of February 2022, I think we cannot turn back the clock on the transatlantic relationship to where it was prior to the 20th of January 2025. The rift is too deep, and the trust that has been lost in American great power politics is too great, not only among allies, but you will share this view around the world. Even a future U.S. government will not simply be able to restart relations where they once stood in the days of the friendly hegemon and its guarantees for a liberal international order, one that has brought democracy to Germany as well. With regard to Russia, Germany has had the painful experience of learning how overdependence can make us vulnerable. We were compelled virtually overnight to dissolve long-standing energy ties with Russia, and we incurred significant costs in the process. These relationships, predicated on mutual rationality and valid contracts, had been established and deepened over decades, dating back to the first pipes for gas agreement of 1970. And yes, you alluded to it as well in the transatlantic relationship too. We must wean ourselves off dependencies that make us vulnerable. This applies first and foremost to security and technology. Achieving European sovereignty in defense and technology is a project that will take generations to complete. It doesn't happen overnight. However, the magnitude of the task must no longer be used to delay taking action, neither by us nor by our European partners. Germany's federal armed forces must become the backbone of conventional defense in Europe. Federal governments have taken the necessary decisions for this since the 24th of February 2022. Yet, to accomplish this, our federal armed forces need not only political support, but also the full support of our entire society. This means having adequate funding, modern equipment, and more personnel. If voluntary service is not sufficient, then we must return to a model based on compulsory service. And I believe that compulsory social service for all would be best, some in the federal armed forces and others in social institutions. In the sphere of technology, dependency on the United States is even greater, and we must be all the less willing to accept it. We know, after all, that being at the cutting edge of technology translates not only into foreign policy power, but also into the power to use digital platforms and social media to exert influence on our domestic policy. Last year in Munich, we were told right to our face how the US administration is set on weakening the liberal and united Europe. Maybe the current dispute between Anthropic and the Pentagon can be a wake-up call or even an opportunity for Europe. Europe has lots going for it as a location for our technology. Europe has talent, markets, and opportunities, but it also has ethical standards, and this is what we should build on. Going back to the cornerstones of our foreign policy, I mentioned Adenauer and the integration with the West. But what does integration with the West mean today? That is one of our era's difficult questions, which of course also must be answered in this ministry. For 75 years, we had a close partnership, but I recall that very well. Also differences from time to time with the United States. These included significant differences over the Iraq War, for instance. However, we were always able to say that we have a common foundation where we can settle our differences and to which we can return. However, this no longer holds true today. The West remains, and I insist, a valuable normative ideal, but the West does not currently exist as a political reality. That is why foreign policy realism now means that we must not delude ourselves. That is what Mark Carney meant in Davos when he referred to Václav Havel's sign in a shop window. Realism means that we must be pragmatic in our dealings with this US administration and focus on our core interests. But this realism also means that we should not bend to others' views. The current US administration has a totally different worldview to ours, one that doesn't care about established rules, partnership, and long-standing trust. No, we cannot change that. Yes, we have to deal with it. But, and this is my firm conviction, we have no reason whatsoever to take on this worldview for ourselves. Great powers may survive in a world without rules. Indeed, in the short term, they may even benefit. That does not apply to us, nor does it apply to the overwhelming majority of countries. That, after all, should be the bridge which we now build. This connects us with so many other people, particularly with the emerging middle powers all around the world. Since the start of my term in office as federal president, I've sought contact with these middle powers, which are not in the headlines every day, but have so much to offer to us strategically. And I am convinced, and I reiterate this, we have much to offer to them as well. Thanks to the fantastic support from and cooperation with you in the Federal Foreign Office and at the German embassies, I have been able to travel many, many times to the ASEAN region, to Gulf states, Turkey, Kenya, South Africa, Chile, and Brazil. Just last week, I was in Mexico again and in some of its neighboring countries to strengthen our partnership with a region of the world that is by no means merely the backyard of a great power. All of these middle powers are seeking contact with us. They too want to reduce dependencies and place their partnerships on a broad footing, as do we. These countries certainly do not share all of our views and interests, but they do share a very central aim with us, namely that the world of the future be more than a duel between China and the United States. But that is precisely why these countries also look very closely at what part we are playing in stabilizing international rules and an order that serves everyone, not just a few. For that reason, I'm convinced that our foreign policy must indeed become more pragmatic and persuasive. However, and I'm also firmly convinced, this does not mean abandoning international law. Our foreign policy does not become more persuasive when we do not designate a violation of international law as such. We've already had to deal with this in the Gaza war, and we had to deal with it in Iran war too. This war is a violation of international law. There is little doubt about that. The fact that the reasoning and the justification had to do with an immediate attack doesn't hold. That also seems to be an assertion shared at least in parts of the services. It is also, and please forgive me for calling it like that, but it is a politically fatal error. And what I find most frustrating is that it is an avoidable and unnecessary war if its goal was to stop Iran on the path to a nuclear bomb. The nuclear deal, and some of you may recall that the nuclear deal had already helped us to make much progress. We were never further away from Iran having nuclear weapons than after the signing of the JCPOA in 2015. Many people from this ministry worked very hard to achieve this agreement for many years. And let me remind all of us here, it was the U.S. Secretary of State who back then said at the signing ceremony that we should not underestimate the historic importance of this moment as we were preventing a war through the agreement that we, the Americans, had to wage against Iran. Without the agreement, in the second year of his first term in office, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the JCPOA. In his second term in office, he has now gone to war. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Federal Foreign Office, international law is not like an old glove that we should remove when others do so. On the contrary, it is vital for all those who cannot count themselves among the great powers, not now and not in the future, even if some may violate against it. International law has lost none of its importance as a regulatory framework, as a rule book, and a source of legitimacy, neither for Germany nor for Europe. This Europe would be lost in a world without law and rules, as the European Union itself is built on law and rules. It would collapse if we took on the world view of brute power. And this, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, this brings us full circle as regards the four cornerstones with which I began my speech. 3 of them have been swept away, I said, and so this cornerstone, European unity, is all the more urgent. A united and strong Europe is no longer merely a commitment from our past, but a geopolitical imperative for our present. The President of the European Commission recently spelled out to the members of the European External Action Service that Europe should be a great power. Big words, indeed. I'm not concerned about whether this is realistic. Instead, I'm far more interested in the question of what sort of power this Europe desires to be. Europe cannot be powerful if we adapt to the zeitgeist of ruthlessness. We can only be powerful if we stand up against this zeitgeist. We need to become stronger militarily, far, far stronger, but this alone will not be enough. We need to reinforce what has made us strong. The united Europe enjoys prosperity, peace, freedom, and cultural influence because we show consideration. Because showing consideration is part of Europe's DNA. Showing consideration for one another, for conflicting interests and their settlement, for law and rules, for history and national backgrounds. And thus, I call on you, let us keep this European reflex, and who better to do so than you here in this ministry. Members of the Federal Foreign Office, esteemed guests, I have just turned 70, a bit older than you, Mr. Waterful, and can tell you that old age may not have many advantages, but it does have some. One benefit is that one becomes somewhat more relaxed in the face of short-lived political and media trends. In the period since 1998 alone, during which I first became involved in foreign policy, which I later had the honor to shape, comments on our foreign policy have seen remarkable swings of the pendulum. I remember times when diplomacy with difficult countries was seen as unseemly, times when anything of military nature was regarded as suspicious and mistaken, times when every screw in the wheel of a battle tank had to be individually justified in the report on military equipment experts and still came in for merciless criticism. When I signed NATO's 2% target in Wales in 2014, public support for this goal was mooted. Germany wanted to be a force for peace without military strength. Its aim was to shape the world with intelligent diplomacy. Today, the pendulum has now swung in the other direction. People say that it is naive to refer to international law, that diplomacy doesn't change anything, that we don't need cultural relations policy, that military strength is the only thing that counts. And I can't believe my eyes when I read media commentaries writing classical diplomacy off as the weak limb of a courageous foreign and security policy based on military strength. Let me tell you, it is time that we develop the grown-up stance on the relationship between military strength and foreign policy wisdom, a stance that is taken for granted in other countries, namely that these two things, military strength and foreign policy wisdom, are interdependent. Members of the Foreign Service, I truly want to encourage you not to lose your compass. You know that German foreign policy will always need 4 pillars. Military strength, so that we're taken seriously. Wise diplomacy in order to find solutions. And this will continue to be necessary to forge alliances. soft power too, that is culture, business, and science to attract the outside world, and an international order to provide a framework and direction. And I urge you not to lose this compass. I urge you not to lose this compass when the political map of the world is being redrawn today. As a foreign service, you should be confident, but not arrogant. You have so many reasons to be confident, so many role models in the 75 years of Federal Foreign Office history. The first staff members who took this ministry with its difficult policy and staff history on a new democratic path. The first women, such as Elinor von Puttkamer, who succeeded in breaking into a thoroughly male-dominated system. The witnesses to global history, such as those who looked after the thousands of East Germans for weeks on the grounds of the West German embassy in Prague in 1989, under the balcony where Genscher gave his speech, or your colleagues from East and West, who laid down the good fortune of German unity in the 2+4 treaty a year later after long nights of negotiations, or the crisis managers in posts all over the world affected by war of conflict, from the convoys in Bosnia in the 1990s or to the traumatic moments at the airport in Kabul, and unfortunately now once again in Ukraine and the Middle East. And of course, the many hard workers, such as those who brought 250,000 Germans home from around the world at the start of COVID-19, the pandemic in 2020, but were hardly able to go home themselves for many weeks. I am grateful to you and thank all those who bring so much dedication and commitment to the Foreign Service. Members of the Federal Foreign Office, none of us, myself included, know what the world of the future will look like. All I know is that there will be no going back to the 1990s or to the 19th century. Germany will not be at the center of historic global events, nor will be inevitably pushed to the sidelines. There are simply no historical blueprints for the geopolitical moment where we now find ourselves. No blueprints for this geopolitical moment. But what an exciting time to be part of the Foreign Service, a service that has reinvented itself so often, can do so again. Do it well and trust in your compass. Thank you very much. Federal President, Federal Minister, thank you so much for these inspiring speeches. Dear guests, we now cordially invite you to help yourselves to coffee, drinks, and finger food in the side foyers of this hall, and to engage in these some important conversations on the sidelines. Please be back at 10:15. Return to your seats. And dear viewers at home and around the world, after the break, we will continue with the second part of this event, look forward to a future-oriented program and of the trainees of the Federal Foreign Service, and look forward to a performance of the singer Leah. Mr. Federal Minister, we look forward to having you with us during the second part of our event this morning. Thank you so much.
Federal administration, well, this doesn't sound so exciting, but what we do is something that's not an end in itself. We want to shape things. We want to change the world for the better for every person, not only in Germany, but globally. My very first day in school was the 11th of September 2001, and I still remember that my sugar cone was as tall as I was. It was blue with sparkling fish. For me, it was a big day, the beginning of a long journey, but it was, of course, a very tragic day for the whole world that marked my generation and myself in some way or the other. And now, 25 years after my first day in school, we can say history goes on. History did not come to an end, and we can still take influence on what course history will take. I think it's a very special time now that we start with all these changes, but I think it's an interesting time to start in this job. Crises can be very frustrating and, of course, can be a burden, but for me personally, it also is a motivation to get involved and help people who need help. Cultural exchange, scientific exchange, linguistic exchange, these are all aspects that the Foreign Office covers and where you can get involved at so many levels. This image of Europe, to me, is standing united, and this is very present with our group as well. I would say it is important to train your diplomats now, because who knows what the developments will look like over the coming months. So we need to learn now, we need to know what's happening and be prepared for the future. Some might say, is this the best moment? But I would say, yes, it's great to be part of this. Well, I think a very marking moment also for our future career will be when you are somewhere for the first time and you see this sign in front of you saying Germany or Germany in any other language, and you sit behind it and you fill this role. I think it's a huge privilege, but at the same time, it comes with a lot of responsibility, of course. And this combination, sitting there, doing your best, and of course, also in preparation, but also at this point in time, this is important in this job. You are representing not yourself as a person at that moment, but in an abstract term, you're representing our country, but you also represent everyone who lives there, your friends, acquaintances, family, everyone you know. Visible faces. Well, it's an institution that will play a role in the long run internationally. You can take influence, you can shape things, you are always in dialogue with others. You want to understand why others act the way they do and what our role is in defending the values that we have in Germany and in Europe. And this democracy and freedom, that we stand up for it and that every day we look for ways to defend these values. What are you holding here? It's my passport. Why? Because I can travel everywhere I want with it, to many countries in the world, and also visa-free to many countries in the world. What does this have to do with the work at the Foreign Office? Well, we not only hand over passports, we also work actively in fostering good diplomatic relations with so many countries in the world, countries that trust us. And this is why we can have this precious passport and travel so freely across the globe. Well, I want to work together with my colleagues to help make this world a safer, more peaceful place in the future. Especially in these times, you need to stand up for your values, for fairness and justice. And you need to try to bring forward our common security. Yes, if I am going to look back in 10 years' time, I hope that I will have made at least a small contribution to having a more peaceful, calm world. And I think that diplomacy and these small steps also in the administration are very important. And I hope that I will have launched additional projects making people smile, actively helping people. The fact that our work is not abstract. Also, if we are in the administration, we truly help people when they need help. I think my task as a young colleague is to work for freedom, prosperity, and security, and also convey these three principles to broader society.
Guten Morgen.
Distinguished guests, you've just heard a few remarks from our young colleagues from very different areas at the Foreign Office. Some of the faces of the future of our Foreign Service. These young colleagues decided to take up one of the most exciting jobs, and as the federal president just said with a lot of appreciation in his keynote speech, it is also one of the most demanding jobs. I would like to thank our colleagues. Many of you are here today. They have shared their own motivations for choosing this job. I'm Andrea Berdesinski. I'm head of the Academy of the German Foreign Service, and I would like to briefly sketch out the program for the next 60 minutes. We have tasked our young diplomats to design the second part of today's event. We've put the program in the hands of trainees who are currently being trained at our academy at Lake Tegel. Together with the policy planning unit, they have come up with a very exciting program. And they thought it was very important to do this as one team across all career strands, and I would like to thank them for their commitment and their work. So what is waiting for you during the next hour? We are talking about the future of diplomacy and the diplomacy of the future. The question of how we can shape foreign policy that is relevant and that assumes a responsibility. Shaping Freedom in a World of Upheaval is the title the trainees have chosen for the second part of our ceremony today. It starts with 3 brief discussions on stage, discussions between people whose lives have been profoundly changed by the Foreign Service and where the Foreign Service has really made a difference for their lives. Then we will have a modern debate format. We will have exciting young experts on stage coming from the field of geopolitics, AI, technology. They will discuss about the relevance of German foreign policy in the future. So I wish you an exciting event, and let's welcome our trainees and their guests.
Auch von uns Anwärterinnen und Anwärtern.
We as trainees would also like to welcome all of you. My name is Lisa Czerner. I'm a trainee of the higher service. The top priority of German foreign policy is the support to Ukraine in its defense against the illegal Russian war of aggression. This is a topic that is especially close to my heart as well, because I myself was on my first posting in Kiev and lived there from 2010 to 2014. I'm delighted to have Vitalina Buran here today. She's head of programming of the Ukrainian Institute in Germany. We will talk about her important work now and how the Foreign Office supports her in this important work. Vitalina, hello. Hello, thanks for having me. Vitalina, what would you reply to someone saying Russia attacks the energy and heat supply, electricity supply of Ukraine on a daily basis? There are more important things in culture. Well, I can understand that people may have this assessment, but it is based on a wrong assumption regarding what culture can do in an existential situation like a war. Russia is not only attacking power stations and our electricity supply, it is attacking our cultural institutions systematically. And the Ministry of Culture and Strategic Communication of Ukraine states that 2,446 cultural institutions were either attacked and damaged or destroyed. This is our history. It's our culture and our memory of the past. This is not a coincidence. It's a strategy that Russia has. And unfortunately, since 2022, 346 cultural activists and artists have been killed, among them 100 journalists, Ukrainian and international journalists. So it's a strategy, and we need to fight against the strategy. And you are doing this in Berlin with the Ukrainian Institute. Would you like to tell us a bit about how the Foreign Office supports you in your important work? Well, we cannot underestimate that support, and me and my team, we are delighted and happy that here in Germany, people understand that culture and cultural diplomacy are not just a soft addition to diplomacy or foreign policy, but that it is foreign policy with different tools or different means. And it sometimes takes longer to have an effect, but projects such as the expansion of cooperation with Eastern countries and Eastern partnerships, we've been part of that program for the third year in a row now, and we support the cooperation between German and Ukrainian NGOs, small NGOs, building up networks that helps Ukrainian colleagues to share their experience with German colleagues as well when it comes to culture, when it comes to talking about values. It cannot be underestimated, really. And the Foreign Office, of course, also supports us in structural terms, and we're very grateful for that support. And our cooperation with the Goethe Institute, also the Goethe Institute in Ukraine, is very precious. It has been ongoing for 3 years. The Foreign Office and other organizations too, such as the German Foreign Exchange Service and IFA, remain our partners in this fight against disinformation, again in this fight for preserving Ukrainian identity, this fight to explain what Ukraine is here in Germany, which is also very important because people can only fight for something if they understand what it's about. So that's a very important mission for us. And without the support of the Foreign Office, it would be very difficult to do. Дякую, слава Україні.
Hallo.
Hello, my name is Anna Trabert. I'm a trainee in the intermediate service. Lena Kunzmann is sitting next to me. Lena, last year you went for a hiking tour in Nepal together with your boyfriend. What happened? Hello, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here at this event. Last year, I traveled to Nepal for a hiking tour with my boyfriend in the Himalaya mountains. In the beginning, we had great weather conditions, but then suddenly the weather changed. On the 9th day of our tour, we started at a base camp to set off for the Lake Trail, which is more than 1,500 meters above sea level. When we started, new snow had fallen in the morning. Our guides were convinced that it was still possible to do the tour. The other hiking groups as well started on their tour in the early morning hours. The higher we went, the heavier the snowfall became, and also wind became stronger. It was barely possible to see. After 5 hours of hiking through the snowstorm, we had to stop the tour and return to the base camp. All hikers had to go back to the base camp or the next village because the snowfall and storm was too dangerous and even life-threatening. as it was very difficult to orientate yourself and we were all exhausted, there were some panic reactions among hikers. People just started to run, hyperventilated or screamed. Everybody tried to climb back down the mountain as soon as possible to get to safety. The intensity of the snowstorm was something no one had foreseen, not even the local guides. After 11 hours, we reached the Samdo village and were, of course, exhausted and freezing, but we're back in safety. We noticed your case because you wrote such a great email of appreciation and thanks to the Foreign Office. How was the embassy in Kathmandu able to support you in that situation? Well, we had to think about how we could come back to Kathmandu from this mountain village. The Nepalese police had blocked the hiking trail due to landslides, floodings, and falling rocks. This path had become too dangerous. An additional attempt to take the Lakhe trail was not possible due to the bad weather conditions. Before we went abroad, we had registered at Elephant Platform, and that also made us think of contacting the embassy in Kathmandu and ask for help. Other hikers coming from other countries had also tried to reach their embassies, but in some cases did not succeed. The German embassy in Kathmandu directly responded and realized the danger we were in. With a lot of commitment, the staff member on the ground organized a helicopter to pick us up. We had to spend a few more days in the mountain village, but then were evacuated by helicopter to Kathmandu and were able to leave the region safely. In hindsight, the helicopter agency told us that without the strong support and commitment of our embassy, a helicopter rescue would not have been possible. Thank you very much for sharing this story with us. And I hope that if I work at a German mission abroad and are entrusted with such cases, I hope I will be able to provide the same support as the colleagues did in that case in Kathmandu. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Ms. Kunzmann, thank you very much for this impressive story. It's really great. Consular officers sometimes can save lives. And those who got dizzy like I did will maybe be happy to come back from the high mountain area and go back to the sea level. We come to Rio now, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. I'm Christopher Henning. I'm a trainee in the higher intermediate service. And I would like to speak about the lack of skilled labor. We all know that Germany was and still is a country of immigration. We depend on well-trained people coming here from other countries, and the Foreign Office with its headquarters in Berlin and the many missions abroad is the most important institutional player in that regard. I'm delighted that we have Felipe Veriato here. Felipe, you are from Brazil. In 2022, you got a visa for skilled workers and came to Germany, but you've been to Germany before in 2014 for several years. Would you like to tell us a bit about that experience? And would you like to tell us about the Foreign Office's role here? Well, thank you very much for having me. This is the second phase I spent in Germany, actually. The first time I came to Germany was in 2014. I'm a mechanical engineer from Brazil. And there is this program in Brazil, Science Without Borders. And through this partnership between Science Without Borders and the German Academic Exchange Service, I came to Germany. And it was very interesting for me to spend these 6 months in Germany. I wanted to learn German. I didn't speak a word of German when I first came here. I couldn't even say hello, so I lived with a guest family for 6 months. After these 6 months, I studied for a year at a technical university. And During the last 6 months, I did an internship at MAN in Munich. And of course, I had to finish my studies and then moved back to Brazil in 2016. But a part of my heart remained in Germany. Well, this sounds fantastic, and I'm delighted to hear that you also benefited from a German Academic Exchange Service scholarship. The DAAD is the biggest scholarship provider in the academic field, and it's funded by the Foreign Office. So that means you had this great experience here, 2 years in Germany, and after that you thought that you liked that stay so much that you would like to come back. And now you're here again, you stayed. In 2022 you came back. What was the process for getting the visa? Well, maybe it also helps to explain what I did in Brazil. I work in digitalization and logistics, and today I'm a consultant for Lufthansa Group. And in 2022, I had this job offer at the beginning of the year, I think in January, and I thought, all right, now I need a visa. It was a really smooth and easy process. I think I booked my appointment in January at the Consulate General in Rio, and in February I already had my appointment, and I have to be honest, people were so friendly, and I was really surprised by that. In March, I received the visa in my passport, and in April I arrived in Germany, but this time I wasn't alone. I went through this process together with my wife. Great, so you could bring along your wife with a family visa? Yes. Well, great, this all happened very quickly. Yes, really, it was so fast. Wonderful. Well, we're very happy to hear that, and of course this will be part of my job in the future, and I think we need to continue working on this. We need to really make sure that we get these skilled workers like Felipe, that we really attract them to Germany. Time is passing, and that always happens when you, or even more so when you're in interesting conversations. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up now, and we will continue with, as you've heard, an expert debate, a fast format where with short interventions about the relevance of German diplomacy in the future. Liz Shu will now come to the floor. She will be the presenter for this event. Welcome.
Vielen, vielen Dank. Mein Name ist
Thank you very much. My name is Liz Zhou. I'm a journalist and moderator with Deutsche Welle. I originally come from Tanzania. And Felipe, I have to tell you, I was surprised to hear you say that the visa process was smooth and was quickly. From my experience, I can tell you a lot about my experience on the issue of visa application. And I think that many people in this room or following us live have different stories to tell, but we won't do that. We focus on the positive aspects pursued and done by the Foreign Service, and the beautiful connection that there is between the Academy of the Federal Foreign Office and the Academy of the Deutsche Welle. Once a year, we host a so-called boot camp. We do media training for the future diplomats. We're dealing with communication skills so that they can be understood by the public. It's so important that the people who work in this ministry or who represent Germany abroad are always able to explain clearly what they do, why it is important, and what kind of repercussions this has on the lives of people. This is why I'm so happy that you have had the stage for the second part. So please give us a round of applause for their commitment and their work here today. Thank you. Well, now we'll proceed with what has been announced as this quick and dynamic panel. I don't know who stood in front of the golden mirrors outside in the blue foyer, in the blue hall. Please raise your hands. I don't know if you noticed there's two signs with golden mirrors, and these are inscribed 75 years. In 75 years, people have come very far. The next steps are taken by us. Which steps are these? How big are these steps going to be? Where does this journey take us? Who do we take on board? And what kind of shoes do we need? Are we wearing flip-flops, or are we wearing hiking boots or sneakers? We want to highlight and talk about the future of diplomacy, the relevance it has, and we have a top-notch panel gathered with us. I'd like to welcome Nicole Kleb. She works with the Bertelsmann Foundation and is the chair of the Young DGAP, the German Council on Foreign Relations. A warm welcome to you. I look forward to Dr. Sarah Pagung from the Körber Foundation. She heads the Department on International Politics. Dr. Tu Nguyen is also a member of the panel. She is acting co-director of the Jacques Delors Center. A warm welcome to you. And you also read it on your invitation in the programs you see on your seats. We want to talk about future-related topics. One topic is AI, and this is why we invited an expert, Lars Zimmermann. He's a member of the Executive Advisory Board of Quantco. What they do is he's going to explain what Quantco does. And we have one seat available, which is reserved for Dr. Antje Nötzold. She is from the Federal Armed Forces in Munich. She's a senior researcher. A warm welcome to you as well. Now, we aim at beginning quickly, and the question that the organizing staff, the trainees, wanted to ask is the following question. Is Germany's relevance in terms of foreign policy is under threat? You all have 90 seconds each to answer this question. Antje, I begin with you. You are expert for energy policy, security policy, for space, for the militarization of space, arms control. And I could think that some people ask and wonder, why is she here at the Federal Foreign Office and not at the Federal Ministry of Defense? But we heard it a lot today. Foreign and security policy are intertwined, and this is why we look forward to your introductory statements. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you here today. I would say the most important thing that we need to face is that we need to acknowledge the new realities. We have ignored geopolitics far too long, but reality caught up with us in the year 2022. The world has come out of Quinta, or Antonio Grandi just said, the old world is dying, or the new struggles to be born. But we, in foreign policy, we need to define our interests clearly and represent these interests. But we also need to focus on presumably new topics, and this is where space comes into play. And you could say, why? We have too many topics, enough topics and conflicts on Earth. Space is so far away. But no, that's not the case. Our security and also the international order is already and in future increasingly taking place in space. Space is the infrastructure of our infrastructure. And if we want to have European sovereignty as demanded by the federal president, we need space. International law is interpreted in space. The lunar mission, mining in space, space traffic management are questions where we need to have more relevance. And we're seeing an arms race in space, and the space is a war theater. We need initiatives by Germany. Not only do we need geo, but also astropolitics. Thank you very much. You were on time, 90 seconds. Not only do we need geopolitics, but we also need astropolitics. And what we exactly can do and the contribution that the foreign policy can lend, you will elaborate on that further. Lars, let's move on to you. You are part of the Executive Advisory Board of a company called Quantco. You are an AI company. Not only do you do your research, but you also work on platforms and systems, and you have clients around the world. You have leading companies, but also the public sector. AI in future in foreign policy. Please talk about share your assessment, and where do you see foreign policy in future? Well, thank you very much. I believe when talking about the future and the future of the Foreign Office, I used to work in the planning staff of the Foreign Office in the time when Joschka Fischer was foreign minister. It was an exciting time. I dealt with the issue of internet and of foreign policy. We didn't talk about digitalization, at least not about AI. So it's nice to be back 20 years later. Thank you for the invitation. I think we underestimate the topic of AI. I don't want to create a doomsday scenario, but let me put it bluntly. What we're seeing today, there's a strong likelihood that the changes through AI will be much greater in dimension because we're seeing private companies playing a role. States have withdrawn from the topic as far as financing is concerned, that is self-inflicted. And just as in space tech, financing is done by private companies. And that is not new. Just think back to Jacob Fugger. I'm a big fan of economic history. The Fuggers were a powerful private company. Jacob Fugger was the wealthiest man in the world and who had influence. And we see this again. And this is one of the big challenges for the foreign policy, but states as well. Thank you very much. We should not leave it to private companies, but more needs to be done, and government needs to get involved and cooperate with them, because the governments alone can't do it, I'm convinced. Thank you. Then let's move on to Nguyen. You look at Europe and at Germany within the European family. Not only are you an expert for European policy, but you also share your knowledge. You are the host of a podcast which is called EU2Go. I can only recommend it. It's published once a month, if I remember it correctly. But let's talk about the relevance of foreign policy. Is it under threat or not? Well, thank you also. Not surprisingly, I want to talk about Germany's role in the European Union, because foreign policy relevance of Germany is inextricably intertwined with the EU, and we need a strong and powerful European Union. This is why it is important that the government wants to shoulder more responsibility and is shouldering more responsibility. But it's not important to only assume the leadership in the discourse and replace it with bilateral or interstate solutions. But that may work, but it weakens the institutions. We need a German leadership role within the European Union that aims at a deepened integration, deepening the internal market, a resilient multi-annual framework, the defense of the values of the EU, democracy and the rule of law, and working towards the necessary EU reforms in order to make the EU capable to act and to make sure that it's not going down under the pressure from outside and the geopolitical tensions from within. We need a strong Germany for a stronger European Union. Germany needs to provide the necessary impetus. Germany needs to assume a stronger role within the European Union. Let me move on to Sarah Pagung. You are an expert for an area and a sector that many people have dealt with here at the Foreign Office. You're an expert on Russia. You look at Russia's foreign and security politics, information politics, but you're also an expert on Eastern Europe, and you look at the relationship between Germany and Russia. When looking at what Germany has achieved and done so far, how would you assess Germany's foreign policy relevance in future? Thank you very much, Liz. I believe Eastern Europe is a good example to illustrate what is going well and where there is room for growth and room for improvement, if you will. When looking at Germany's role in the past years and the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, we see that Germany has a great deal of relevance because Berlin is pivotal when it comes to garnering military and political support for Ukraine. Berlin is pivotal when it comes to maintaining that consensus. And at the same time, it's a judgment on Germany's and European foreign policy. We see that there is not the opportunity to play an active shaping role. In the last years, President Trump has tried to force a Ukraine deal with unfavorable conditions for Ukraine, and the Europeans were able to prevent that, but they could not manage to bring about a more beneficial deal. And this is one of the challenges that we have as far as the German foreign political relevance is concerned. And allow me to share another assessment. For one, you can answer the question whether Germany foreign policy relevance is decided in Kiev or Washington, but also in New Delhi and China. And against the backdrop of disruptions we're seeing into international order, I believe Germany needs to make more offers, and we need to take a closer look at what there is beyond West and beyond Western and beyond European. What is out there? Thank you very much. Little can be achieved without Berlin in terms of foreign policy, but the scope for action and to shape foreign policy need to be broadened, and Germany needs to look beyond the partners we have, look to the global south and further. We will go into this more deeply later. We'll move on to Nicole. You are an expert for foreign policy, for transatlantic relations. You observe power relations also within international organizations in the United Nations. And one thing that is important to you is the following: the fact that young people are represented and that they're given space when it comes to foreign policy topics. 90 seconds for you to tell us whether the German foreign policy relevance is under threat. Thank you for your invitation. I would say that Germany's foreign political relevance, as my previous speakers have said, depends strongly on Europe. We see economic clouds is one of the aspects that gives us relevance, and economic clout is under threat. We see Europe's united power. We see that Europe is divided, and there is an aim at dividing us from within and outside. And one third aspect is our credibility. You heard the federal president. We should stand up and defend international law, and we should be more clear about that. And from my perspective, this is what young people expect from German foreign policy and European foreign policy. We are a generation. I'm 28 years old. I don't know borders. My first, I first got to know borders when I traveled to the U.S. I had to apply for a visa. It was a foreign concept, and I think it's good for me. And this is something that multilateralism has given us in the past decades in terms of benefits. We should not give up on that. And the second aspect is international law. It's our guarantee for peace after the Second World War. And it's well worth fighting for international law. And it's important to listen to young people. Thank you very much, Nicole. I'd like to get back to one aspect you mentioned. You mentioned that it's important to take a clear position away from diplomatic positions and to communicate these positions clearly. Thank you. I would like us to go into detail and talk more about the topics that have been already discussed and look at what is German foreign policy, what is German diplomacy doing well. I'd like to formulate also recommendations for actions in the future, and then we will become a bit more radical and we talk about what can we leave behind? What needs to go? And in a third and last part, we look at what we can add, what we need to add, things that have not been done, but which are important in order to place Germany on a good footing for the future. Lars, I will start this block with you. You focus on AI, but also digital affairs. The federal foreign minister mentioned it in his speech. He's 60 plus, but he is very active on social media. I don't know if you follow him on TikTok, on Instagram. I don't know, maybe he's very successful. Maybe you know the Wade Food Snack Corner, where he presents and tests different types of food, or maybe you've seen the video Europe for Sure, featuring penguins generated with AI. So when you look at what has been done, where would you leave a like? Well, I don't use social media. I know his activities, but I know the positive and the negative aspects. And you can also lead a life using social media in moderation. Of course, I know the minister's channels. I believe communication is tremendously important. I don't want to compliment too much, but you see that the Foreign Office has changed. Many people say that. You notice this when looking at the figures. If you look beyond that, it's just one aspect of how technology changes the work of the Federal Foreign Office. AI is going to affect the structure of the ministry. I think in the long run, you can't do much about that. When you compare which states are changing the structure of organization of their ministries and what compare it to other states in the European Union, you could say that other states are more advanced. So I would recommend that the Foreign Office use these technologies more. And the state has two functions. On the one hand, state and government regulates technology, but at the same time also applies technology. That gives the state a special role. Only by using technology massively can regulate in a prudent way. I think regulation is done badly in Germany, but also on the level of the European Union. That has got to do with that EU countries are not good appliers of technology. This moves us to the area of to-dos and what is not going well. I would assume that the minister would also like to hear some positive aspects. And of course, foreign policy is not only done here in the Federal Foreign Office, but in the field of AI. What do you think? What could help us and give us some sort of standing in terms of foreign policy? Well, I speak my mind. I believe we can do more. I'm a bit uncomfortable or worried. It's not a criticism of former ministers, but I work globally in the field of AI. We're on an upward trajectory, more money. We're seeing a positive dynamics. But when I look inside of Germany, I see the opposite. I believe the difference between what we could achieve and what we do achieve is big. I don't want to say anything negative, but I would like to call on you, do more. We're seeing and witnessing entrepreneurial times, even if the outlook is bleak. But if you walk ahead courageously and move away from the Bonn Republic, this Germany can achieve great things. So the potential is there. Let's take that with us. And Antje, now I look forward to your comment. But when we look to space, the Chancellor just visited Norway. He visited a space station there, a German company which is active there, wants to send up missiles, rockets into space. Are there any positive aspects?
Well, I think Germany woke up to that, and I think that's a good first step. Many ministries have become active, but as I said before, space is part of this systemic rivalry we're going to see, but it offers huge potential as well. So there is this space where international order is only in its first steps and where we have some potential to really create some regulation. There are no borders in space. China and Russia are our neighbors in space, as a minister has said it in a speech last year, if I may quote that person here. So we need to work for this. And Germany, of course, had struggled whether to sign the cooperation in the US space program. So there is the opportunity to create a regulatory framework and win partners. There are almost 100 states that have space programs, so there is an opportunity. The space security strategy, co-drafted by the Foreign Office last year and adopted, is a document that states that Germany wants to assume a leading role here. This is a great starting point, and now we need to implement it, and we need to fill it with life. And maybe one addition, things are going rather well. You also mentioned communication, but I think we also should talk about what works well. Substance and presence. The Foreign Office, despite AI, is still very present on the ground in many countries in the world. As was said before by the federal president, but also by the federal minister, I think, is that it is people's business. AI is nice to have, that's what I heard, but in the end, it is up to people to do this business. Nicole, you can ask different people. Some will say we are shortly only a few steps away of a new world order. Others say we are already in the midst of a new world order. What do you think is positive about Germany's cooperation with other states, be it transatlantic partners or international and multilateral organizations, and the cooperation that happens there? Well, asking about positive things is difficult when we always focus on negative things, but I would say a positive example is that there is a lot of coordination going on with France and the UK, so there is this attempt to move forward together. I think that is a positive step. I also think it is great to see that we have not just accepted everything over the last weeks. I think we can still do a bit better. But the latest speeches with regard to the Iran conflicts held by the Chancellor Merz, for example, were rather clear. So there has been some learning process here, to mention a positive thing, but I would have liked to see that from the beginning, people standing up and really stating that this is illegal, it's breaching international law. Why do we not have political agreement on this? Other experts do. Of course, you can still say there are good reasons for some hesitation, but it's important to be clear, not only for our partners, but for ourselves as well. And I'm glad to see that we took this step, and I think we can take it at an earlier stage in the future. But Germany has taken a very clear stance in other cases. This has become clear. We've also seen it over the last 4 years in the war against Ukraine. German politicians have and still do taken a clear stance for Ukraine, have said that we stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, have supported Ukraine. And in the relations with Russia and in the current geopolitical situation, what would you see? Where would you see steps or behavior that would be a role model for German politics or should be repeated or built on? Well, I think there are quite some points, especially that we've seen in the last 4 years. One thing that has come up again and again and that we've repeatedly seen is there is no problem in terms of analysis. I think we have no deficit in that regard, be it the Russian full invasion of Ukraine or everything that happened in the transatlantic relationship over the last year. I had the feeling that we really briefly assess the situation, that we have a very clear analysis for what it means for European security or the multilateral or global order, and that we are very well able to draw conclusions. Of course, that includes armament, catching up in terms of technology, reducing that backlog, and I think for me, it's also essential that domestic and foreign policy, in times where foreign policy debates are also held at home around the dinner table and have global are globally influenced. This is a time where we need to think about how can we communicate political decisions to find majorities, and how do we need to shape political projects to also be able to take controversial decisions regarding foreign policy. And I think we've been quite good at doing this. The deficit in the analysis does not exist that much, but I think in our actions we see more of a deficit. But I would also say that I'm half optimistic here as well, because things have changed. We've seen movement in the armament debate, the special fund that was announced last year, but do we have the stamina and the unity in Europe to really keep pace in the long run? Thank you very much for that. And then we will zoom in on Europe to what would you think? Last week, we've had the Council of Foreign Ministers and the European Council. When we come back to what you said, that is, people understand where do our representatives go, what are they discussing there, what do they represent for Germany on behalf of Germany, where would you see good developments and where would you think there is room for improvement? Well, I think what works well is that Germany is very present in the EU, in the European debates, and also assumes responsibility or wants to assume responsibility here. And I think what's very good in general terms is we've seen a lot of change, as you said, when we look at the debates on defense policy. 5 years ago, it would have been unthinkable to talk about European armament and European defense as we do now, joint procurement and so forth. So I think one positive moment of the last months and this last year was the European reaction to Greenland, Trump's threat to take over Greenland. I think that was really an example where we could absolutely see that European countries stood united. They united in one common reaction. They took one clear position. Of course, there were also prepared responses to threats regarding tariffs, for example. So there was preparation, and this is not only about trade policies, but it is about territorial integrity of European nations. And if Europeans are prepared and have a common stance, they can really get things going. But unfortunately, we cannot achieve this unity in all areas. I think we will also discuss further ways of how to come to that unity later on. My timer says that we don't have that much time left, so as of now, we will do the following. We will do the same as when we speak about the best diet. We identify what is candy and can just go away, and what do we need to have on our plate? Where are the vegetables, vitamins, fibers, the good stuff? So, and then I would like to address that topic with you too. German foreign policy in the future, German diplomacy in the future. Which aspects do we need to leave behind, and what should we do instead? Well, again, with a view to Europe, I think the veto right is a problem. Unanimity in foreign policy really doesn't bring us forward. I know it's very difficult to abolish unanimity, and it is a goal that we have to pursue further. Also, when it comes to enlargement, if we add even more member states than we have at the moment, and what also needs to be on the plate is answers to the big questions. The EU is faced with tremendous challenges, and I think there are three basic questions. How do we shape the European business model, the growth model? How do we shape European sovereignty, and how do we shape institutional ability to act? And I think we have the right analyses, and we have to think about this. We need to find the right answers, but we are not yet in that mode where we really find solutions or answers. Instead, we see many discussions about cutting red tape. It's an important topic, yes, but I don't know if that is really the kind of discussion that we need to move out of this difficult situation in the long run. Now, when we look to the future, and Germany wants to be seen as a relevant actor in the future too, what position should Germany take when it comes to decisions where you need to decide whether you want to be a good team player and just go with the others, or you have to or do you want to defend your own position and your own opinion? I think both is important. We need a German leading role that also wants to shape things, that wants to shape Europe too, but at the same time takes other European member states on board. It's not the idea is not to steamroll smaller member states as a big member state. The idea is to take up the other countries' interests as well and make sure that we become a European power that also takes the smaller states on board. Thank you. Lars. I know that you have a long list. You may have some recommendations or tips on what can be done. It doesn't have to be explicitly something that needs to be done by the Foreign Office, but maybe something that's interesting to all involved in foreign policy in a broader sense. How does Germany get this clout, this power? The question comes up, whom do I sell chips, high performance chips? What is the idea? Where should we be headed? Well, I agree in principle, but I would like to add a second dimension. I think we really underestimate the role of small states in Europe. Europe is a continent of small states. Many countries have less than 20 million inhabitants, and I think there were great times when I grew up or became an adult where small member states in the EU played an important role. And I think even though the big powers, of course, do what they do, I think it is a good idea to invest in relations with smaller states, both within the EU and beyond. And that brings me to another topic. I also think that many future reliable relations with other countries should be made with countries that go beyond the EU. I think it's right that Germany looks at the EU very much, but these new global issues, and one of them is AI, then Singapore is a natural ally of Germany. The UAE are important in many aspects, and these are ecosystems and networks that are emerging between states, and they go beyond the EU and beyond the traditional institutions of the last century. And I think it would be very good for Germany to have a global viewpoint as a country too, even though the EU or the majority in the EU wants something different, because I think there are many common interests in the technology field. And a third point is, I believe any foreign office or foreign ministry would be well advised to think about a strategy for cooperation with the private sector, where the big money is. They drive change. And we speak about huge funds that have more than 1 billion in capital available, and I think that this offers great opportunity. But it's mainly the private sector that drives this change, also at a global level. And I think if you want to engage in diplomacy in the 21st century that is marked by technology, you need to work with those who are the drivers behind these developments. And these are not many actors. Unfortunately, it's not a good sign that these actors. These are only few actors, but we need a strategy for the Foreign Office for its cooperation with tech. All right, so you say we need a new strategy, and when I look to Antje and the space area, you said there is already a strategy, but it needs to be filled with life. What would you think? What are the next steps, and what needs to be left behind or put away to reach the goal faster? Well, the interesting thing, or the good thing about this security strategy for space, is that it really spells out everything. It hasn't stopped there. It really has fully fledged recommendations for action. And I think we need to look at fields where we can regulate things in the international sphere. And I think this is a very political space. It is militarized more and more. It's marked by conflicts, increasingly marked by conflicts. The war in Ukraine started with cyber in space, just to remind you of that. And I think people are start understanding this now. Space traffic management is an important point. Space is fully overcrowded. This is no longer an open space, but tens of thousands of new satellites are to be sent to space, and we all have an interest in finding regulations for that. Even the Chinese have already signaled they would be willing to talk, and we need to become active in different fora. Since the 80s, we've had discussions about what a weapon in space is, and we haven't really made progress because it's not an easy question to answer. But these are things we should talk about, and many many actors are interested in talking about this and finding synergies. More and more actors are active in space, also commercial actors, but also more and more states that are interested to become active in space and that see it as important for the society and economy. This brings in more partners you can talk to, and you can try to find synergies together with them. Finding synergies seems to be an important buzzword, be it when it comes to AI and Singapore, but also when it comes to space and when we look for partners to implement new things or impose things. Sarah, are there any terms or patterns or ways of thinking where we need to say, all right, the future of diplomacy needs to be shaped in a different way. We are in times of change and we just need to leave certain things out. What would you say?
Konkrete Begriffe, aber ich würde es vielleicht sagen.
Well, maybe not specific terms, but I would like to talk about two illusions. From my point of view, we far too often have an assumption that we are preferred attractive partner because we have a self-image of being on a continent that is prosperous and technologically advanced, but when traveling outside of Europe, you realize that this is not the case anymore, and that you're not that partner anymore that is a given. We need to be economically performing to make this offer, to become this preferred partner, attractive partner again. That's one thing. And the second illusion, maybe not an illusion, but something that stems from a simultaneousness of crises and pressure. There are many crises and challenges happening at the same time, and it needs to become a practice to find answers simultaneously and at the same time formulate answers. We're seeing that Europe is arming itself, which has become necessary due to the security situation, but at the same time we need to ask ourselves, what do we want to do with this military power? What kind of security order do we want? What kind of relations to the US do we want, to other states, to Russia? How do we deal with Russia also with respect to the future of Ukraine? And this is something that we need to factor in, because armament as such alone is not a political concept alone. And this is what was reflected in the speeches as well. We need to have the balance between military strength and diplomatic wisdom. Nicole, you want to get more young people involved in foreign politics, and we have heard many trainees explain to us why they chose this career, why they want to represent Germany. What's your advice to the diplomats of the future? How should they shape their work? What should they focus on so that Germany remains politically relevant? Well, I think we should take a realistic approach. It will take some time until those trainees will be in charge. I think many people will have to retire before those trainees now shoulder responsibility. I think what we saw today, we need to claim stages if we're not given this stage. We need to become more loud. I think the foreign ministry perceives us. I see positive developments. I think you are far more ahead than other ministries, but I hope that the trainees will remain in service for a long time. So I hope that they will not get distracted by political developments. You are experts. Claim your space. Share your opinions and views. And this is what we should do more in foreign policy as Germany. We're seeing a divided world, a disrupted world. The thinking in spheres of influences, according to Huntington, is increasing at university. I heard this is outdated. Realism is outdated. It's not relevant. But all of a sudden, it came came back, and we should not get intimidated. We should stay true to our ideals and continue to fight for these ideals. And let me quote Donald Trump, his tough love goes both ways, and I think we can and may be more courageous. Well, this wraps it up quite nicely. I would like to wrap up. Would you like to have 60 more seconds in order to sum up the one thing that German foreign policy needs most now, or did you mention it all? Well, I would like to sum up and say young people and take young citizens on board is important. It's important to offer explanations. It is important to do good foreign policy right now. We need to take citizens on board to also explain complex structures so that we're not overtaken by people at the margins, left and right. I think we need to improve the way we explain our actions, and we need more unity and more courage. Diplomacy may be frank. Germans are known to be frank, and we should be the same in diplomacy as well. Dr. Sarah Pagung, what does German foreign policy need? We were invited to tell German diplomats what German foreign policy needs. Well, there are many things that could be mentioned here. What really I dealt with in the past 2 years is what are the preconditions for good foreign policy faced with political discussions we had. We need to do our homework in domestic policies to achieve political stability and use this to also pursue good foreign policy, but also create a strong economy to have good things on offer. I mean, our support to Ukraine costs a lot of money, or it is also important to become an important partner to Brazil or India, and that has got a lot to do with this economic cloud. And this is what we need to look at and do our homework in before looking at how things can be implemented. Thank you very much. Dr. Tunyan, I'd like to address matters pertaining to the EU. There's a lot of debate whether sticking to international law and the rule of law is still important, but with regards to the EU, it remains relevant. The EU cannot function otherwise. Without functioning judiciary in the single individual states, there cannot be common institutions, the internal markets, and there cannot be solidarity if we are not sure that we all share the same values within the European Union. And this is why it is so important that the member states and the Federal Republic of Germany focuses on rule of law, because otherwise our foundation is threatening to collapse. And in the long run, we need to ask ourselves the questions how the EU is dealing with authoritarian governments like we're seeing in Hungary. Fascinating question. We cannot discuss this in detail, but let's move on to Lars Zimmermann. What does German foreign policy need in your point of view? Well, you need courage. It may sound banal, but if we were to be more courageous and take bigger steps ahead. I'm not referring to Germany alone, but that holds true for many other countries as well. When we're seeing insecurity around the world, and we see this at home as well, it is a bad decision to come to a halt, because then you wobble more. If I keep on moving, I get some sort of stability. I think you need to take a deliberate choice to walk into the future. I would never do without the personal, interpersonal, diplomatic elements. When talking about the foreign service, you talk about a lot of tradition, and I think you need to have this stability despite all disruption. And last but not least, I think you should also go where foreign policy is not that institutionalized. I think we have powerful and ever more powerful actors that withdraw from the government's control. That hasn't to be bad per se, but politics and foreign policy needs to move towards those actors too, and this is where it gains credibility as well. Thank you very much. And then Dr. Antje Nötzold, what is needed in foreign policy? I think we all agree that foreign policy, not just German foreign policy, is confronted with many, many tasks and challenges. And I think we all have our pet peeve. I think we were invited to talk about priorities and to elaborate why we need to act and have to act. But the difficulty is we need to focus on all aspects, because if we neglect topics, reality will catch up with us. International order is under threat. German foreign policy needs to become active. We need to interfere and we need to offer alternatives. And if we do so, we will remain relevant. I would like to quote a federal foreign minister 15 years ago, not a German foreign minister, the Polish foreign minister Sikorski said, "I don't fear German power as much as I fear German inertia and inactivity." Thank you very much. This by way of conclusion, we will stop here, but please remain seated. You listen carefully, but someone listened very carefully indeed, because we were talking about his ministry. Please welcome the Federal Foreign Minister, Johann Wadefuhr. A very warm welcome to you. Well, no worries. I'm visible as such, but the interpreters will need to see you as well. No, don't worry. I don't want to comment. I have many comments on many aspects. Also on the fact on the visa applications. I visited the Federal Foreign Office's subsidiary, the BFRA. We're working on visa matters. This is just an example. You can compare it to the math skills in Germany. Many tend to, and I tend to say, I'm not very good at math. Basically, you're much better. We're much better in many areas than we think we are. I would like to thank you, Oliver Linz, for giving the impetus. We talked about traditions. We will have a traditional part, and we will have a second part in which we give the new generation the opportunity to create the program. Andrea Berdezinski, thank you for giving the floor to the trainees, to the future diplomats, and for giving them the leeway and scope to develop their own ideas. You are the future of our foreign service. Thank you so much. I think we received a lot of impotence. I could comment on some aspects, but I think there are different foray. I think you don't want a foreign minister to co-comment on all the things that were said. Thank you so much. I found this to be very inspiring. I take many things away with me, but I received a great deal of inspiration and challenges, and I talked to some of the heads of departments and directorates, and we will take it away with us. I think one sentence I liked very much: we need to keep moving, we need to move ahead, we need to continue. Coming to a standstill is the wrong decision. I think we received a great deal of inspiration and impetus. Thank you so much for the wonderful contributions. Thank you for the excellent moderation. I loved listening to you. And I would like to congratulate all of us on this beautiful, wonderful event. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and thank you to the panelists. Please give them a round of applause.
Dienst, Andrea Berezinski.
And then Andrea Berezinski will have the floor again, the head of the Academy of the Foreign Service. Thank you very much, Liz Shu, for this very exciting debate. A big thank you to all of our guests for the food for thought they've given us. The minister has just left. Also, my thanks to him. And I would like to thank all our young colleagues, the trainees who have come to the stage, spoken in front of a camera, who have worked behind the stage, backstage. They really worked as a team to create this event. Thank you very much for your effort. My thanks go to colleagues of the Policy Planning Unit. It was really teamwork that we've seen here, and I think it worked very well. My thanks go to the protocol, the technicians, and the interpreters as well. Thank you.
Ja,
Well, we end this event with a musical performance. Our colleagues wish to have a guest who stands for the future, for a modern, creative, cosmopolitan Germany. And I'm delighted to present Lea. I don't know if you who are gathered here in this room know Lea. If you don't, talk to your children tonight or other young Germans you know, and I can tell you all of them will know her. Lea is not only one of the most successful musicians in Germany, Lea is a voice for the younger generation. Her songs are heard across the globe, and as I was told, they are often used in German language classes to teach young people German. And Lea accompanied many of our trainees during their teenage years and played a role in their growing up. In her songs, Lea speaks about topics that are important for the young generation and that are also important for us as a society: identity, courage, doubt, new beginnings, and also the topic of freedom, freedom to choose one's own path. A warm welcome to Lea. She will present two songs, Wenn du mich lässt and Zu dir. The stage is yours.
Hallo, danke schön. So schön, dass wir heute da sein dürfen.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Hannes, at the guitar.
Unendliche Weite in deinen Augen. Würd so gerne tauchen bis zum Grund. Was du Schwäche nennst, finde ich besonders. Ich lieb deine Art und für mich ist dein Chaos Kunst. Du musst mich nicht zum Lachen bringen und nicht so tun, als geht's dir gut. Musst mir nicht irgendetwas vorspielen. Wie du bist du genug. Wie du bist du gut. Ich spür, es frisst sich auf die Gedanken, so laut es tut weh. Und obwohl du's nicht zeigst, dass es dich grad zerreißt, ich kann's sehen, kann dich sehen. Ich werd dich lieben, auch wenn du's grad nicht kannst. Werd für dich lügen, auch wenn du's nicht verlangst. Ich würd für dich kämpfen und wenn ich mich dabei verletz, ich werd dich lieben, wenn du mich lässt. Ich hör dir gerne zu beim Schweigen. Bin ich mit dir, ist da Magie. Würd dir gern deine Schönheit zeigen, die du grad nicht siehst, doch ich weiß nicht wie. Ich spür, es frisst sich auf die Gedanken, so laut es tut weh. Und obwohl du's nicht zeigst, dass es dich kann, sehen, kann dich sehen. Ich werd dich lieben, auch wenn du's grad nicht kannst. Werd für dich lügen, auch wenn du's nicht verlangst. Ich würd für dich kämpfen, und wenn ich mich dabei verletz. Ich werd dich lieben, wenn du mich lässt. Dankeschön. Vielen Dank. Oh, danke. Ja, es ist uns wirklich eine ganz, ganz große Ehre.
It's a great honor for us to be here today. Thank you very much. And the next song is called Zu dir.
Wenn ich sein muss, wie ich wirklich bin, ohne Maske, ohne fakes Grinsen. Ich würde zu dir gehen. Wenn Träume platzen, die Erde bebt, es zum Leben oder Sterben geht. Ich würde zu dir gehen. Wenn ich glücklich bin, fast am Ziel, ich das teilen muss, weil ich so sehr fühl. Ich würde zu dir gehen. Wenn ich nix mehr hab, nicht einen Cent, auf der Suche nach nem Platz zum Pennen. Ich würd zu dir gehen, sag, darf ich zu dir? In den besten Zeiten, auch wenn alles vorbei ist und ich alles vergeige und es keiner mehr bei mir. Sag, darf ich zu dir? In den besten Zeiten, auch wenn alles vorbei ist und ich alles vergeige und es keiner mehr bei mir. Darf ich dann zu dir, zu dir, zu dir? Darf ich dann zu dir, zu dir, zu dir? Wenn ich mich schäme wegen meiner Fehler und die Lösung einfach grad nicht sehen kann. Ich würde zu dir gehen. Wenn ich feiern will, so wie noch nie, will ich das Leben spüren, Energie. Ich würde zu dir gehen. Wenn die Tränen kommen und ich trauern muss, weil ich da einfach durch muss bis zum Schluss. Ich würde zu dir gehen, wenn die letzte Stunde für mich schlägt und ich die Wahl hab, wohin ich mich leg. Ich würde zu dir gehen, sag, darf ich zu dir? In den besten Zeiten, auch wenn alles vorbei ist und ich alles vergeige und es keiner mehr bei mir. Sag, darf ich zu dir? In den besten Zeiten, auch wenn alles vorbei ist und ich alles vergeige und es keiner mehr bei mir. Darf ich dann zu dir, zu dir, zu dir? Darf ich dann zu dir, zu dir, zu dir? Vielen Dank. Dankeschön.
Thank you very much.
Dankeschön.